Okay, I hope all of you can see me clearly. I would love to introduce ourselves a bit before going forward. So, Eduzone, as some of you may know, we have been operating for the past 15 years now. We started in 2010, so it's been about 15 long years. We are among the first couple of firms in Sri Lanka to promote higher education in Sweden for Sri Lankan students. And when we started back in 2010, we were the first in Sri Lanka at the time to introduce higher education in Finland at a commercial level to the Sri Lankan market. And now we have so many of those who apply directly. There are plenty of other agents. But when we started, it was a tiny number of students choosing countries like Finland from Sri Lanka at the time. And up to date, we have over ₹1 billion worth of scholarships. Interestingly, when we started, Finland used to have an absolute free education system all the way until 2019. So whoever chose Finland until the year 2019, they had to pay no tuition fee at all. And also up to date, we have processed over 2,000 Sri Lankan nationals for mainly for Sweden, Finland, and Norway. And we also have processed, I think, around 30 to 35 students for Estonia as well um, during these 15 years of time. So if we keep moving forward, I already explained a bit about our organization, what we do. But what's more important is the last part. We have a practice of accepting about 50 to 60 applications every year because we personally pay a high level of attention to all the applicants. We personally handle all the applications. We don't outsource them to anyone. So because of that reason, we only accept about 50 to 60 applicants every year because some of you may know Finland has a very short application period. Usually, the application period lasts for about 2 to 3 weeks, and there's always a limit of number of applicants we can process during that time period. So, the very purpose of conducting these information sessions are to provide you with information. What are the basic requirements to apply for these countries? What financial arrangements you should think of, and what are the potential abilities you will have to settle down after completion of your studies. So we'll share all this information with you. See, that'll kind of help you make an informed decision. We start accepting new applications on the first day of June every year. So even this year, it's going to be 1st of June. So if you are to go through us, you can prepare all the arrangements, prepare all the documents, and come see us after 1st of June to apply for next year's autumn. That is 2026 August. I understand it's uh, far away from now on, but then again, the idea is there are some requirements you should prepare for. And if we apply on time between 15th March to 15th April next year, you can receive all these admission decisions and start the visa process. We always plan things in advance, and that's the very reason why you are conducting these information sessions now, so you can start working on fulfilling all the requirements. So if I quickly move to the next slide, it's about the entry requirements you have to have in order to apply for a scholarship of some kind or in order to apply for a master's or even a bachelor's program. The general requirement for a master's is to have a bachelor's degree with a class, especially if you are adding Finland to one of the two options. If you apply for Sweden alone, you may be able to apply without a class for your bachelor's. But if you are to add Finland, because we as a practice only apply for research universities in Finland. So if you are to apply for a research university, you should have at least a second lower or a GPA closer to a second lower to be able to successfully consider for an admission. So the general requirement is to have a bachelor's with a class. Even if you have, let's say, a GPA of about 2.7, 2.8 or plus, closer to a second lower, you can still give it a try, at least for Sweden. And the second requirement is pretty common for most countries, IELTS or PT score. IELTS, if you are to apply for a Finnish university, the general requirement is to have a score of 6.5 is 6 for each component. If it is PTE, the general requirement again is to have an overall score of 62 with no component less than 59. And for Sweden, in case if you are not willing to take up IELTS, there's one other way you can apply without IELTS. That's applicable only for Sweden, which is to have at least a simple pass for the subject general English at your A levels. So if you have completed a bachelor's and if you have passed your general English at A levels with at least a simple pass, you can apply for an exemption from the English proficiency test score requirement only for Sweden. But then again, I have this feeling that they will probably remove this requirement in the years to come. So since we have plenty of time ahead of us, it's always better if you can try to work on the IELTS or PT requirement. And then the other requirement, especially for Sweden, is to have a bachelor's degree that is 4 years in length. It's a country-specific requirement for Sweden. We did not have this requirement until the year 2022. That's when they introduced this. What they say is if you have completed your bachelor's from a Sri Lankan university, the bachelor's has to be the 4 years in length, or else if you have completed a 3 years bachelor's, you have to have a master's degree completed that has a length of at least 1 year. So this is applicable only for those graduates who have completed their bachelor's from local public universities. In case if you have completed a British degree, even if it is within Sri Lanka, or even if you completed a Malaysian degree within Sri Lanka, this does not apply to you. But in case if you come from a Sri Lankan public university, you should have a bachelor's degree that is 4 years in length, or else if you have a 3 year degree, you have to have um, at least a 1 year long master's completed. The third point is the fact that you can always pay a tuition fee and study in case if you are admitted without a scholarship. I can give you an average range of the tuition fees. Usually for Sweden, if you are studying anything related to science or technology, the average fee involved will cost you on average about 10 to 12,000 euros. That comes to about almost 3 to 3.6 or sometimes even 4 million, let's say 3 to 4 million Sri Lankan rupees for a period of 1 year. If you are studying something related to humanities or business management or non-technical or non-science subjects, the average tuition fee involved at the moment is about 50,000 Swedish kronor, which comes to about almost like 1.3, about 2.6 to 3 million per annum. If you think about Finland, the average cost involved is anywhere between 8,000 to 15,000 euros. 8,000 at the moment is about 2.4 million, whereas 15,000 comes to about 4.5 million. So your tuition fee can, vary on the university. It depends on entirely on the university. The average is about 8 to 15,000 euros in Finland. And in Sweden, it's almost less or more the same, but it's always, most of the times, it's on the lesser side. So the average tuition fee involved, I would say, is about 10,000 euros in Finland, which comes to about 3 to 3.5 million. And the fourth point is very important. It's about the requirement to complete the test GMAT. It's not always a compulsory requirement, but you have, let's say, for an example, if you have completed the bachelor's degree with a second upper or first class and your IELTS, let's say if two Sri Lankans are applying together to one of these universities where GMAT is an optional requirement, the one with GMAT is likely to be admitted before the other person is being considered for an admission. That's why GMAT is important. You can complete it within Sri Lanka, and it's only applicable for those who apply for master's degrees related to business administration. So if your first degree is related to business administration, and if you want to apply for a subject area like business administration or international business or entrepreneurship or business analytics or anything along the business domain, there are some universities in both countries, Sweden and Finland, where they prefer applicants with GMAT. And this a tiny number of universities, such as Aalto University in Finland, for example, they have made it compulsory. So if you are to apply for most business-related programs, you should have a GMAT score. And as you may know, the competition nowadays are at an enormous level. There's plenty of Sri Lankans and other immigrants are applying for these countries. So if you want to stand out from the rest, I highly recommend you to take up GMAT because it will certainly increase your chances of getting admitted into a good university. Having said that, if you do not feel comfortable taking up the test, there are always options you can apply without having to have a GMAT score. And the last point is the fact that you should have the ability to pay remaining tuition fees if admitted for a partial scholarship. Let's assume you receive a scholarship for 50% of the tuition fee value. You should still have sufficient money to pay for the remaining 50%. Let's say if the original tuition fee is 10,000 euros, you receive a scholarship of 50%. So you still have to pay the remaining 50 out of your pocket. So that's something you have to consider because my personal opinion is that you are highly unlikely to get stuck in these countries. There's only one key scenario that you can fail if you don't prepare, and that is your finances. Because if you are to pick any of these European countries where there's a language barrier and several other challenges ahead of you, we'll talk about it a bit later, you must financially prepare to be able to pay for your tuition fees, at least for the first year or year and a half, and your living expenses at least for a period of 6 months or more, because it can take some time for you to find that first income earning avenue. And until you find that, you obviously have to keep covering up your living expenses and pay your bills on your own. So that is something you have to prepare for. If we keep moving forward, I would like to talk about the disadvantages of these countries. The first one I notice is probably the fact that they have their own languages. So there's a language barrier that you have to overcome. So you should learn the local language, at least in the long term. And that is one of the key challenges you'll probably have in these countries. The second one is about the weather. So that is, again, not something we can control. So if you're planning on moving into any of these countries, you have to be aware of the harsh weather they have throughout the year pretty much, and there's no other option. The third one is no longer applicable in today's world because now there's increased connectivity between our country and all these Northern European countries. But back in the old days, I used to have complaints, especially from a fraction of our clients. They're like, Tamak, I'm the only person of color in my area, and sometimes I feel uncomfortable. People are there, like staring at me and all that. But nowadays, I think all the universities they have hundreds of South Asian students, so this is probably no longer a concern for the most. But again, that is something you may have to prepare for, especially if you're planning on moving to a rural area where there's lesser number of South Asians. And the last one is pretty common, as is probably the biggest challenge you have in these Scandinavian countries. Yes, it's not that easy to find a job, especially right after your arrival. It can take a few months. So always my advice is to prepare for at least the first 6 months to go on your own. Have sufficient funds. The average requirement is, let's say, if you're going as an individual, please have at least good on the minimum 8,000 Swedish kroners. Let's say about 200,000 rupees on the minimum. These are bottom level figures that will merely cover your accommodation and food, assuming you cook your own food. If you're going with your spouse, you may have to look into a figure of closer to at least 250,000 or more. Or if you are married and if you have a child, then probably 300,000 or 350,000. So you have to prepare for these figures. So let's say if you are going in as a family of three, you should have sufficient money at least for the first 6 months. So that gives you a figure of about on the minimum 1.8 million. So this is something you have to have apart from the tuition fees. And tuition fees, there's also um, a key difference between the two countries. If you want to apply for Sweden, the tuition fee requirement is usually semestral basis. So once you're admitted, you have to pay for the first semester, apply for your visa, and you can then move in. But then our advice is always prepare to have that second semester installment to be paid out of your own pocket. So you can pay for the first semester, yes, but still you should have sufficient funds at least for the second semester. In Finland, it's slightly different. The fund requirement is you have to pay for the first year in total, in full. But the difference there is since Finland offers a higher probability for you to secure a scholarship of some kind as we speak. This may change in future, but at least it's possible at the moment. So since you are likely to be able to offer some kind of a scholarship, let's assume you receive a 50% scholarship, the tuition fee you pay will be either similar or lesser to that of Sweden's semestral payment. So that is why, end of the day, the financial preparation is pretty much less or more the same for both countries. For Sweden, you may have to pay for the first semester and apply for your visa. And in Finland, you have to pay for the first year. But since there are higher chances for you to secure a partial scholar at least, the amount of you pay in both cases won't be that much of different. If we keep moving forward, now I would love to explain a bit about the advantages. The very first one I notice is the fact that you have plenty of scholarship opportunities, especially in countries like Finland. And even in Sweden, there's a fair chance you can receive some kind of a scholarship. And the interesting thing about these countries, if you may know about it, all these Scandinavian countries used to offer free education, absolute free education to international students. When we started processing applicants for Sweden, they used to have an absolute free system. But when we started our process, in a couple of months' time, they came up with tuition fees. So they introduced their tuition fees back in 2011. Anyone who studied in Sweden prior to 2011, they paid zero tuition fees. Same for Finland. They used to have a free system all the way until 2019, and they introduced their tuition fees in 2019. Same for Norway. Norway used to be the last country in that block to introduce tuition fees in the year of 2023. Because of the fact that these countries used to offer absolute free education to international students from all around the world, I think that's one key reason why they still offer at least partial scholarships in large numbers. And a selected few can always receive 100% fee waivers, and in some cases, fully funded scholarships as well. The second one I noticed is the fact that they offer social security benefits. There's been a cut down on these benefits to immigrants, which I believe is fair because the systems have been abused by recent immigrants from all around the world lately. But then again, you still have some basic benefits, such as certain social benefits available to your children, mostly like free, in terms of free education. And even if they introduce a tuition fee, it will be within an affordable range for sure. And also, uh, your health care benefits in the event of hospitalizations, a large fraction of the cost will be
සමහර ඒවා
covered by the
නෑ
relevant
මම ලියපුවේ
governments. And I think,
නෑ
yes,
නෑ
it
පාස්
can change in future, but at the moment, compared to most other countries, these are safe with options with regard to social security
මම
benefits.
නිව්ට්‍රිෂන් එක නම් ලිව්වේ
Third one is the ability to apply for a work permit, even with an entry level kind of a job offer. But this is nowadays, this is more like a theoretical concept because back in the old days, I used to have plenty of clients who apply for work permits in countries like Sweden, let's say as a cleaner. Because until the year 2022, the requirement to apply for a work permit was to have a salary of at least 13,250 Swedish kronas, which was the minimum wage kind of a salary in Sweden. So anyone who find any full-time job with a contract, they were able to apply for work permits. But now they have increased these figures to about 28,000 something, and this I think they currently planning to increase it a bit more further. So nowadays, even if you find a job at the bottom level, I don't think it's possible for you to find or apply for a work permit. But theoretically, if you meet that salary requirement, you can still be granted a work permit. So I recommend you to work on learning the Swedish language or Finnish language once you move into these countries. Have some amount of capital in your hand to cover up your expenses, at least for the first few months till you start until you start working in these countries, and have sufficient funds at least to cover your tuition fees for the first 2 semesters or so. If you can cover it up for first 3 semesters, that'll be far better. But then on the minimum, at least for the first 2 semesters, if you have it, you can feel safe. We already talked about the fourth point. You have accessible healthcare facilities, but still, I recommend you to purchase an insurance on your own once your visas are granted, because the whole world is moving from uh, a situation where they had the ability to provide social security benefits for everyone in the countries to a scenario where they have been cutting down as much as possible. I think it's more like a universal thing nowadays. All the countries are less or more following the same thing. So it's always, although they offer certain healthcare benefits in the event of hospitalization, I still recommend anyone who choose these countries to apply for a medical insurance on their own once their journey is approved. But yes, you do have access to some healthcare benefits. And we already covered the part where free education is offered to your children at the school level, and even at the daycare level in some of the countries like Sweden and Finland. But then I think even these things will change in future, so you have to be prepared for that. At the moment, yes, you have public funded daycares, and you don't pay much, even if it's a private daycare, because they're partially funded by relevant governments. The point before last one is important because even I learned it from one of my previous clients. I think he found it himself, and he's the one who informed me about it. In both countries, if let's say if you go together with your spouse, if your spouse want to pursue some kind of vocational training, as long as he or she completes the vocational training program in the local language, it's available free of charge. You don't have to pay anything for that. But before you enroll with the program, you obviously have to learn the Swedish or Finnish language and then acquire a certain level of fluency, maybe pass a language exam and obtain a certificate before you enroll. But if you can meet this requirement, there won't be any tuition fees to pay. An interesting thing about this is, especially in a country like Sweden, all these vocational training programs are designed by looking at the job market outside. So there's a very high probability for you to find a job offer that meets the salary requirement for a work permit if you pursue any of these vocational training programs properly. So if you plan it well in advance, I think still it is possible for you to settle down in these countries, secure citizenship and to secure citizenship in the long term. The last point is pretty clear. All these countries nowadays, they have inclusive systems in place to absorb immigrants. And I was surprised to learn that in Sweden, one third of the Swedish population actually they born elsewhere. So it's that kind of a multiracial country. And whether that's a pro or con, I don't know. I'm not going to debate about it, but then it's a fact. So they have inclusive systems in place to absorb all the immigrants. They offer them language classes free of charge in both countries. They offer them the ability to, obtain vocational training at the cost of the state to all immigrants, all qualifying immigrants. They also offer educational opportunities to all the children of the recent immigrants. So all these are still there, less or more. But the question is, will these benefits will remain as it is in 10 years' time? That is a question I cannot answer. But at the moment, they do have a very inclusive system, and I'm very happy to, or I would say I'm proud to tell that at least over 500 or 600, one fourth of our clients who went to countries like Sweden and Finland prior to the year 2015, for sure, they have obtained their citizenship already. So we do have hundreds of Swedish and Finnish citizens processed by Eduzone at the moment. And I would love to talk about things you have to be concerned of. First one is you must either be on a scholarship or have the ability to pay at least the first 2 semesters. I already, in fact, covered this. You have to have some kind of funds in hand to pay for the first 2 semesters on the minimum. The second one is you should have sufficient funds to cover up your living expenses at least for the first 6 months. My estimation is, again, these are bottom level figures, but at least 1.8 million for a family of two or 1.5 million for an individual. You must have the willingness to learn the local language and to make local contacts. The second part is very important nowadays because my understanding is those who can make local contacts, get to know people from the local environment, they will probably have a higher probability to adopt to these environments pretty easily compared to the ones who move with their own community. Maybe this is one reason why there have been complaints from some of the individuals. Most of our clients, they don't do that, but I've heard similar things about not being able to find jobs in these countries and all because they expect someone else to find a job for them, with someone from the community to find a job for them, which is not going to happen in most cases. So it's always better if you can go out, talk to people, especially small business owners. I've had plenty of clients who have done it. They go business to business, talk to them, and since you have work price, if they are in the need of hiring someone, they would definitely consider if your personal appearance is good. And the other point is also something you can do in these countries. You do have the ability to at least try securing a job offer, for the spouse, provided they find a job that meets the country's statutory requirement. I don't really recommend you to do it nowadays because the immigration laws have been changing constantly over the last few years' time. So it's always better to complete your studies first and then look into the options you have to settle down. But if you really want to, let's say if your spouse find a job that meets the country's statutory requirement for a work permit, theoretically you can still apply for a work permit if you want to, but I don't really recommend it anymore. The best thing you can do is to complete your education, apply for your post-study time period. In Sweden, you get about 1 year of post-study time. In Finland, you get 2 years. So during this time, if one of you can find a job offer, you can probably apply for a work permit and continue to stay in the country. So that is also part of my last point. I highly recommend you to complete your studies entirely or find a legal pathway before discontinuing. By what I meant to say is that in countries like Sweden, there's a possibility that you can complete the first semester or first 30 credits and apply for a work permit. Plenty of people have done it in the past. And you may be able to still do it. Let's say, for an example, if you come from the software engineering background, there's plenty of opportunities in Sweden compared to even some of the English speaking countries. It's a fact. But then my advice is, at the moment, if I were you, I would rather complete my studies and I try to be on the job at the same time because in Sweden you're allowed to work full time as long as you can manage your study time. With the rosters, you're allowed to do both. And if you complete your masters, you will be reducing all possible risks to have a visa refusal with regard to your work permits. So yes, you can apply for a work permit without completing your course after arrival, but it's always better if you can complete your program first and then try to apply for a work permit. But you still have that as an option. If you find a job, you can give it a try, which I don't recommend. If I keep moving forward, I would love to explain the process about how the process will look like if you apply through Eduzone. Our process consists of three key steps. One is to go through a formal assessment process. The idea is you provide us some documents, maybe your bachelor's degree cert, the transcript, your passport copy, along with our assessment application, and an assessment fee of 35,000 rupees, which is something we will not increase for the year 2026. So once you hand over everything, we can spend about a couple of weeks and try to offer you a list of options we can apply with an increased level of probability to be admitted. So we can give you a complete list, the program names, the course contents, and exact documents we need from you and to process you further. So after 2 weeks, you can pick your options and submit the actual documents to us. And it works in a way we always apply for Sweden and Finland simultaneously for the same cost. And let's say if you are married and if your spouse is equally qualified, if both of you have bachelor's degrees, we can apply for both countries at no extra cost. In such an event, we only charge from one person. So the idea is you can initiate the assessment process, and then from the assessment outcome we show you, you can pick about 3 to 4 options from Sweden, another 3 to 4 options from Finland if you're adding Finland, and submit the actual documents along with an application fee of 185,000 Sri Lankan rupees. I understand it's slightly expensive compared to some of the other options, but then again, this in return will assure you a placement for one of the options you pick from our assessment. In case if you are married, and if you want to add your spouse into the process, we still charge the same amount from both of you. So you only pay one assessment fee and one application fee. And the visa process is slightly different. The Swedish and Finnish visa process, one of the key differences is that for Sweden, there's no compulsory interview requirement. Only about 1/5 of our clients receive interviews nowadays, but there's two possible scenarios that could happen. One is they can, I think I received a question. Please allow me some time to deliver the entire presentation. Once we are done, I'll give you guys some time to ask all the questions. Appreciate it. So I was explaining about the visa process difference between Sweden and Finland. For Sweden, there's two possible scenarios. Once you receive the admission, you can pay your first semester fee. You have to organize certain minimal documents. The most important one is your proof of funds. Generally, the proof of fund requirement for a single individual or single applicant for Sweden, at the moment, if you're applying for 2-year visa, it'll be around almost like 6 to 7 million rupees on average. If you are applying as a family of two, then this will increase to about 10 million on average. These are not exact figures. I've always added the 20-25% buffer to the actual requirement. And if you are a family of three, then you will need about 105 to 110, or I would say 10.5 to 11 million rupees on average. They don't care much about source of funds and all, especially for Sweden, but you have to have these funds. And you can always organize this at the last minute as well. There's no such a requirement as to how many days you have kept these funds in the past. We can still come up with reasonable explanations. And if we come up with reasonable explanations, we can still be granted a visa. So the whole idea is when you move to the visa process, you receive your admission decision, you pay for the first semester for Sweden, you gather all the documents, and then you apply for the visa online, 100% electronic process. What will then happen is there's two possible scenarios. They can either request you to appear for a biometric visit at the embassy in New Delhi, which is the best case scenario. Back in the old days, we used to have direct grants, but about a couple of years back, they changed the process. Now, what they say is in order for us to grant you a visa, we have to see you in person. So that's the purpose of biometric identification process. So if you receive such a call, all you have to do is visit the embassy on a weekday morning, provide your biometrics. You can come out of the embassy and your visa is highly likely to be granted without anything else. But in very rare cases, they can always call you up for an interview. The second scenario is they will call you up for an interview. If that happens, they will tell you when to visit the embassy, at what time. So you have to be there on time, face the interview, and then you can come back and wait for a decision. In both cases for Sweden, you have to visit the embassy in New Delhi only once. 99.99 times, you only visit the embassy as a one-time in and out visit. There's been one or two cases over last 15 years when the applicant had to go to the embassy twice. It has happened, yes. But then again, I think we shared half of the travel cost for the second time. It rarely happens. Generally, it's a one-time in and out visit. For Finland, it's less or more the same. The only difference is you apply online, you have to book an appointment through the VFS system in New Delhi, and then visit the visa application center on time, provide your documents, provide your biometrics. You may have to face an interview, and then you can come back and wait for a decision. In case if your visa is granted for both countries, for Sweden, they will send this resident permit card because they issue nowadays this plastic biometric card. They will send it to the local honorary consul in Colombo. In Finland, if your visa is granted, they will send it to the VFS application center in Colombo. So you only visit New Delhi once in most cases. And that's a summary of the visa process. Obviously, these requirements can change in future, but at the moment, this is how the process works. Your sole concern after receiving an admission should be to organize the finances. As I explained before, for an individual applicant, you need at least 6 to 7 million. For a family of two, you need at least on average 9 to 9.5 million. And for a family of three, you need at least 10 to 10.5 million. And for each additional child, you should add at least 1.5 to 2 million. So that's the general idea. If we keep moving forward, I already explained you the assessment process. You have to submit copies of your bachelor's degree certificate, transcript, and passport along with our assessment application and the assessment fee, which is 35,000 rupees. Once you hand over these documents, we can get back to you with a list of options available for you to apply along with the course contents. So you can pick your options from our list. In case you are married and if you want to apply together as husband and wife, both for higher education, just to increase your chances of securing a scholarship, we're happy to do that for you at no extra cost. And the next step is the actual application process. Once you identify the options to apply from the assessment, you pick the options. You can pick up to 3 to 4 from Sweden and another 3 to 4 for Finland if you're adding Finland. But ensure you work on your IELTS if that is the case. Because for research universities in Finland, IELTS is compulsory. And once you pick your options and submit your list along with the supporting documents, we charge about 185,000 rupees, non-refundable, except on one scenario. In case if you do not receive any admission out of the options you pick from our assessment outcome, we are liable to entirely refund that amount. It rarely happens because our success rate is close to I would say 97, 98% with regard to admissions. So, but anyway, that's how the process works. And if the two of you are applying together, if you and your spouse want to apply together for multiple master's programs, even in that case, this figure will remain the same. Third step is the visa process. Once you receive an admission, we can start working on the visa process. We also charge a service fee. There's two possible scenarios again. In case if you receive a scholarship for at least 50% of the tuition fee value, we charge about 350,000 Sri Lankan rupees from the main applicant and extra 100,000 from the co-applicant. In case if you receive no scholarship or in case if your scholarship value is less than 49%, then our charges will drop to about 350,000 for the main applicant and 100,000 for the co-applicant. Sorry, in case if your scholar is more than 50%, it's 450,000 main applicant plus 100,000 co-applicant. In case if it's less than 49%, or in case if you pay a tuition fee, then it's 350,000 for the main applicant and 100,000 for the co-applicant. And to align our interest with that of these countries, we don't charge anything from children. And that's how the process works. And if I quickly move to the cost involved, I can again give you a summary of the actual costs. If you go through us, you have to pay the assessment fee, which is 35,000. The actual application fee, which is about 185,000. Visa fees, again, is different between the two countries. In Sweden, at the moment, it's about 1,500 Swedish kroners per adult applicant and half of that for a child. So 1,500 is equivalent to about 45,000 or less, and half of that maybe 22,500 for each child you have. But in Finland, it's on the more expensive side. The average student fee in Finland, there was a recent increase. I just made a couple of applications, I think 3, 4 days back. And now they have increased the application fee from 350 euros to around 410 euros or something. And it used to be 350. 410 is about 100 and almost like 130, 140,000 rupees. And for a secondary applicant, it used to be about 470, but nowadays I think about 510 or 520 something. So that comes to about 160,000. And for each child, it used to be about 240. Now it's at 270. So that's roughly around, I would say, close to 80,000 rupees. So everything together, if a family of three are going to apply for Finland, I think the visa fee alone will cost them about 300, good about close to 400,000 rupees for a family of three. As an individual applicant, the average cost involved will be 130 something range. And for a family of two, you're looking at around 300,000 rupees. I know it's expensive, but as I explained, there's a higher probability for you to secure a scholarship from Finland compared to Sweden. So in that case, although there's a higher visa fee involved, you still have to, you will save money from the tuition fees. And even if you receive a 50% scholarship, um, when you multiply the figure by 2 years, it's like at least 10,000 euros, which is about 3 million. So that's about visa fees. In addition to that, you have to think about our service charge. As I explained, it's about 350,000 or plus 100,000 in case if you receive no scholarship or if your scholarship value is below 49%, or 450,000 plus 100,000 in case if you're married, in the event of securing a scholarship for at least 50%. Apart from these three, you have to think about your air tickets. There's two air tickets involved in this case. You have to think about the air ticket cost to go to New Delhi. Usually, on average, direct flight nowadays will cost at least 100,000 or less, I think. And you have to also plan the ticketing cost involved to go from Sri Lanka to one of these destinations. On average, you can fly one way because you'll have a resident permit by then. So when you fly one way, you still need to have at least good 200,000 rupees or close to that amount to cover up your air ticket cost. And then you have to multiply that by the number of individuals applying together. And also there are other expenses. As I explained, you have to think about your living expenses for the first 6 months. You have to think about your tuition fees at least for the first year. And obviously, when you travel to New Delhi, you may need some money to be spent there. And also, you had to think about buying clothes and all this. So you obviously need to have a budget. I would say for an individual applicant, the average budget involved, apart from proof of funds, will be somewhere around 5.5 or 5 to 5.5 million. For a family of two, this is going to be on average 6.5 to 7 million. And for a family of three, this is going to be closer to 7.5 to 8 million. So that's a rough figure. It's not the exacts, but this is what you should prepare for. And if we keep moving forward, I would love to talk about the pathways you'll have to settle down in these countries. There's two major pathways most of our clients use. The first one is the common one. You can apply for a work permit, and you have two possible scenarios there. If you're married and flying with your spouse, if one of you can fulfill the country's requirement to apply for a work permit, the other can naturally stay as the dependent. At the moment in Sweden, the salary threshold requirement is somewhere around 28,000 Swedish kronor. So if you find a job being related to science or technology, you're highly likely to fulfill this figure anyways. The only issue is with those who study humanities related subjects. Let's say if you pursue a master's related to business or related to arts, then this can be a bit more challenging. But then again, there are individuals who manage to overcome these issues. It's entirely up to the client. And then if you think about Finland, the salary requirement, they had the recent increase before a few months back. They increased it from 12,000 euros to 14,000 some euros, which is still perfectly possible. So 14,000 euros for a period of 1 year. So as long as your job role pays that figure, and as an annual income, you can still apply for a work permit. But these things can change in future, so you have to always prepare for the worst case. The second pathway is through completing a doctoral level program, which is probably the safest mode pathway, but also the most difficult one to attempt, because finding a job is also relatively difficult. You can do it, but obviously it's not going to be that easy. Like no one is, waiting there to offer you a job of any kind. You have to go out your own ways and find one. But then the PhD pathways can be a bit more difficult because they have limited fundings. You have to find a research supervisor. You have to apply. But then again, that's the safest way because PhD is naturally considered as equivalent to employment in these countries. So even if you secure an offer for a PhD, you will be granted a work permit. And the beautiful thing about this in Sweden, I think that provision is still there. If you complete a PhD, you can be granted with permanent residency with no additional requirements. Let's say if there's no such a law or it's no longer active, by the time you complete a PhD, which takes like good 3 to 4 years time, you are highly likely to be able to fulfill that requirement to apply for permanent residency. They had recent increase of the number of years. In Sweden, it's a total of 7 now. In Finland, I think it's around 5 years time, 5 or 6 years. But then, since they grant you type A visas nowadays, your study time periods also will be counted towards this. So naturally, the wait is about good 4 to 5 years after securing a job offer or after you start working full time in the country after graduation. So these are the two commonly most used pathways. In addition to this, you can also have other avenues as well. For an example, there's a fraction of Sri Lankans who try to apply for the permanent residency by establishing businesses there. Tiny fraction, but it's still possible. They do have certain pathways, but these are the two most commonly used pathways in these countries. And that's pretty much it for today. I would love to take in questions if you have any. As I explained before, the very purpose of these sessions in advance is to provide you with information, whatever we know, so you can make an informed decision. If you are to go through us, we start accepting new applications from 1st of June onwards. And the moment we reach our cap of 60 to 65 every year, we usually stop our application period and focus on processing those applications that were submitted on time. So I already have a couple of questions, I think. I'll try to pay attention to this. You can send me your questions if there's any. Bhagya has a question. Which language can learn easily, Finnish or Swedish? Well, both are known to be difficult languages to learn. But then again, you do have certain support system available in both countries. So if you think about Swedish for Immigrant Centers scattered throughout Sweden, for an example, they conduct entirely free language programs. You don't have to pay any. And even in Finland, they have similar mechanism where you can learn the Finnish language. And as far as I know, they even pay you some kind of monthly allowance if you become a full-time learner, which I don't recommend anyways. I don't recommend you to take any of these social benefits in the current turbulent environment. But I think both languages are equally difficult to learn. But if you put in efforts, I'm sure you can learn the language because there's plenty of hundreds of, I think, close to thousands, few thousand Sri Lankans who have become naturalized citizens in these countries. So if it is possible for them, it has to be possible for you as well. Anita has a question. Do we need to submit the original degree certificate or copies for Sweden? Well, all these countries nowadays practice digital application processes. So what we'll probably need from you, Anita, is to send us clearly scanned documents of your academic certificates and other certs. So we need digital copies, scan using a regular scanner. Anita also has another question. Student visa will be for how many years, and after how many years we can apply for PR? I think I already explained this, Anita, during the process. You can apply for full-length visa to Finland throughout the entire duration of your study period. It's nowadays it's possible for Sweden as well, but you have to have proof of funds for the both years. So if you have it, you can apply for the entire duration of your stay there as a student. The permanent residency requirement in Sweden is about 7 years now, but your study time period can be counted towards that length. In Finland, it's about 5 to 6 years. But then again, in Finland, they offer you a type A visa. So your study time period again will be counted towards that residency requirement. So that is the basic idea. Oh, the other pathway is to work on securing an offer for a PhD, which is probably the most safest thing to do if you can, become a successful applicant. Lukman Ahmed has a question for which intake you are starting the process now. Well, Lukman, as I explained before, we are currently not accepting new applications. There's no point of applying either because there's only one intake in these countries, one major intake. If you think about Sweden, for an example, there's an intake in January, but only 5 or 6 masters are available for the entire Jan intake. So it's not viable for us to do it commercially. For Finland, it's the same story. We only apply for research universities. There's 9 of them in Finland, and they may have about 5% of all the programs being delivered for Jan intake, but then it's not good enough for us to apply. So we only apply for the autumn intake. We accept new applications from 1st of June. If you apply on time between 15th March to 15th April every year, you're likely to be able to receive all these admission decisions, pick the best one from the list and start working on the visa process. And that's all I have as questions. Um, yep. So if you have no further questions, I'll probably end up the session for today. And thank you, everyone. You can always contact us if you have any questions. There's 3 numbers I mentioned here. If you are to initiate the process, you can come back after 1st of June. If you have any questions, feel free to contact any of these 3 numbers. The first 2 numbers, the first one is that of Ravishus, 0762803838. The second one is Guyanese, that's 0770287872. And the third one is mine, but that's available only on WhatsApp. Yeah, 2000 Lukman has again, it means 2026. Yes, Lukman. So it's 2026 autumn, and I have explained all the entry requirements. So you can start working on the requirements if you are to apply for next year. Thank you, everyone, and you all have a good night, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, and enjoy your weekend. Bye bye.